Welcome to this session on last minute preparation for Snap. So, we meet after nearly 2 weeks after IFT has been done. A lot of you might not have taken IFT to focus on Snap. A lot of you might be taking all the exams with an NMAT third attempt thrown in between, and so on. So, before I go into the specifics of this session, and this might not be a very long session really, the SNAP is probably one of the easiest exams to crack. What I'll do is I'll take you in brief through the broad pattern of SNAP and how it has changed over the last couple of years. Maybe a couple of things to expect from my side, and then we can move on to the questions. So people who are watching it here, you know my basic methodology. I'll probably give you some gyan for the next 5 to 10 minutes at the most, and then we can move on to your questions. Hello Akshay and Ankish, nice to see you back. So, what are the big changes with respect to Snap this year compared to last? If you see historically, Snap has had one big change last year where it changed its paper pattern. For those of you who are taking Snap for the first time, Snap used to be an extremely easy exam till 2015 for the simple reason that it used to give a lot of weightage to LR. For those of you who are unaware, Snap initially used to have 40 questions each for Quant DI as one section, 40 for verbal, 40 for GK, and 30 for LR. However, in terms of the marks, LR used to have 2 marks per question. So that was straight away 60 marks for the LR section and for 1 mark each for the other. So it was 40 plus 40 plus 40 plus 60. So the total used to go up to 180. What that meant was that the cutoff for SIBM would often reach levels like 115, which is nearly 67% of the marks. And the cutoff for SCMHRD, and here I'm talking really about the top two colleges in SNAP. So SCMHRD used to cross around 105, and we used to always tell people that look, you need to at least try and cross 100. Now, a major change that happened in SNAP was first in the year 2012, where they stopped giving out the copy of the paper. That was because Snap historically has had a reputation of having a few mistakes in the test. This also happened in 2011 or 12, if I'm not wrong, and a lot of people took their case on the net. That is where from the next year round they actually stopped giving the paper. They used to take back the paper, the question paper from you at the end of the exam. So this continued up to 2015. In 16 last year, they first experimented with a paper pattern change. So what they have done now is that the focus has shifted from reasoning to all-round ability. So quant and verbal are really the same. 40 questions, 40 marks. Whereas now reasoning went up in terms of questions from 30 to 40 and marks came down from 60 to 40, which means now you get only 1 mark per question. So earlier the strategy that people used to have, that they would crack reasoning, I have seen people get 55, 56 marks in reasoning and बाकी सब में थोड़ा थोड़ा करके 100 cross कर लो. But now with reasoning accounting only for 40 marks, everything else becomes difficult. And then GK has dropped down from 40 to 30 with 1 mark per question. So that basically they've leveled the playing field. Now you need to be reasonably good in all sections. That's one. This year they've launched the second, they've probably added a level in terms of the difficulty, where now they've said that this is an online test. So Snap may a lot of things that you could do on paper like IFT are no longer applicable. One of the most important things that you guys need to remember with respect to Snap is, I would say, Please do not expect anything. And I will repeat these 5 words umpteen times today, based also on the experience that we've had with CAT and IFT. See, in CAT, a lot of you would have seen that the DI was tougher than usual. For example, para summary came back in an MCQ format, etc. So there were surprises. Now, people, why I am saying don't expect anything is because I've seen students go to a level of micromanaging their strategy or micro strategizing to crack an exam. इसमें ऐसा करूंगा, इसमें वैसा करूंगा. It does not work that way. When it came to IFT, in one of my webinars, I mentioned that IFT used to have 6 sections. So if they have 4 sections with subsections, subsectional cutoff nahi lagega. But if it is 6 sections, sectional cutoff lagega. So be well prepared for all sections. Now I personally could not go there on that day, but the first thing that I saw was that IFT had 6 sections. Now somebody who left DI completely or quant completely would have been screwed. So similarly, now when we look at Snap and when we look at it online, you would realize that this is a totally new ball game altogether, right? So you can have a broad level plan that okay, I need to do these things. But apart from that, you're really micromanaging your strategy, planning out your attempts down to the smallest detail is not going to work because this is an entirely new field on which you're fighting. Please remember that and then go and take the exam. Okay, coming to the 4 sections, let me first start with the easiest of the 4 in terms of explanation. We look at GK, then Snap over the years. Earlier, it used to have a lot of focus on trivia and static GK. Over the last couple of years, the Snap authorities have very clearly said that it is a current affairs section with emphasis on the last 2 years. So people who are planning to ask me questions based on GK, please understand this very clearly that GK, when I tell you that it's current affairs over the last 2 years, there is absolutely no way you are going to prepare for that unless you are a very well read person. If you have a habit of reading a newspaper every day, probably going to online blogs and reading them, or going to all these online news portals, whether of this ideology or that, that's not a big problem. But if you have been reading online portals, you read newspapers, you read current affairs magazines, or if somebody has been preparing for, say, a bank exam, then yes, it is easy enough. But today, if I sit and say I want to prepare for Snap GK, what will you prepare? How many headlines will you read over in 3 days over the last 2 years? Okay, so you can maybe go back and look at some bank material to see the headlines, but it will not help you too much. It might help you with 1 or 2 questions here and there. Generally, Snap GK is something where you need to be well read in general. Now, what do you do in such a case where you aren't very well read or you feel you aren't very well read? One, in the exam, Snap GK is clearly the smallest part of the exam, 30 questions. So there the focus in terms of marks is not going to be very high. You go and even do it in single digits. You get even 20 to 25% of that section right. You are in pretty good shape. You don't need to worry anything more than that. एंड एटलीस्ट उतना जीके तो हर बंदे को आना ही चाहिए. Forget whether you're preparing actively for bank or other exams or not. So in Snap, if you are not able to crack 7 to 8 questions at least out of the 30, then you are anyways not prepared for Snap. Fine. Coming to the other sections, when I look at, let's say, LR, for years I have maintained, and if you go back and read some of my older articles on how to prepare for Snap, I've always said that Snap has had a collection of puzzles. So it's like solving a puzzle book that somebody gave you in the vacation. I'm not saying that it is very easy. Snap has a lot of numerical logic puzzles, then you'll have random puzzles, critical path aa jata hai, You have those input output tracing. Then there are some of those diagrammatic figure or table based puzzles. Occasionally you will have the arrangements. Again, in terms of theory preparation, frankly, there is not much theory preparation you can do as far as the LR section is concerned. However, having said that, the best way to prepare for the LR section in Snap is to ensure that you practice enough sectional tests and enough mocks. One of the strategies that you can do is, as I said earlier in the beginning of the session, is that the SNAP authorities used to release the paper at least up to 2012, if I'm not wrong. So they'll be there on our website also, they'll be there available on the internet in general. Download those tests and forget how much time, but try and solve the LR section there. That will give you a fair idea of what kind of thought process the examiner uses in the SNAP exam. For example, I remember a couple of years back, SNAP used to have a very famous question type where they used to have a machine problem. Step 1, x equal to something, y equal to something. Step 2, x equal to x plus 3, y equal to. So it used to look like an algorithm that we engineers used to make in our programming lectures. And no offense meant to any commerce or specifically art students out there, but this actually used to look like a programming algorithm that we used to work on. And it was a very famous question type that used to come with at least 4 to 5 questions. तो अगर आपने वो क्रैक कर दिया सारे मार्क्स मिल जाएंगे. But if you go wrong, if you're not meticulous enough in a step 1 to step 2 format, then you will probably get stuck somewhere. Then there used to be those numerical logic questions where you need to form an equation and solve the question. या ratio proportion का कुछ logic है. Occasionally, you will also have the critical reasoning questions. It is basically verbal reasoning, but वो आ जाएगा तो उसे solve करना है. Again, the point that I'm trying to underline out here is that unlike an IFT or unlike an CAT or an NMAT, I can't really tell you that ये 5 chapter पढ़ लो तो आपका snap का LR हो जाएगा. You can get absolutely anything. I have seen a set where देर आर दोज वेरी बेसिक वेन डायग्राम का क्वेश्चन. एक ट्राइंगल दे दिया, एक स्क्वायर है, एक सर्कल है, एक रेक्टेंगल है, हर एक में कुछ नंबर लिखे हुए हैं. एंड देन देर बी दोज क्वेश्चंस के हाउ मेनी पीपल लाइक दिस एंड दिस बट नॉट दिस, और हाउ मेनी पीपल लाइक ऑल फोर स्पोर्ट्स. इट्स बेसिक्स ऑफ वेन डायग्राम्स बट इट्स ऑब्जर्वेशन. कहीं पे क्रिटिकल पाथ आ जाता है, कहीं पे लीनियर अरेंजमेंट आ जाता है. So they are all puzzles you need to learn how to manage time and maximize your attempts. Because end of the day, it is 150 questions in those 120 minutes. So it now becomes more of a speed test. Okay. Thirdly, coming to QA/DI, long time back, Snap used to have slightly tougher DI, but I've seen the focus on DI has gone down. Similarly, the intensity of the DI has gone down. So I've started seeing reasonably simpler DI in Snap. The maths again is not very difficult, to a large extent solvable. The focus always or till date has generally been a lot on arithmetic, uh, chapters of modern math where you can have chapters of modern math where you can have applications of word problems like say permutations, combinations, probability, sequences, series, etc. Again, chapters in geometry where you can have applications like say a trigo, those heights and distances ka problems, then mensuration, etc. Algebra again, yes, logs, surds, linear equations very popular, quadratic popular enough, number theory. But again, snap maths used to be something that you could crack. Individually, if you look at each section in snap, you can say that ये हर एक easy है. Unlike say an IFT where you'll probably say DI tough लगा या CAT में जाओ तो DI LR tough है. Snap doesn't work that way. Snap generally has all its sections easy enough, but you need to manage them so that you maximize your overall score. Okay, and I will need a little help. I've actually seen the notification a long time back. Historically, Snap did not have sectional cutoffs. So the people used to maximize their score and get into SIBM. Any of you have not read the notification very recently? I read it when it was first announced. Have they announced anything about sectional cutoffs this year? I just missed that part. Just type in your answer because accordingly I'll tell you the strategy for each section. जहां तक मुझे पता है they don't have sectionals, but if they've announced something new, just let me know. Finally, when I come to verbal, so the historical focus of Snap has been on vocabulary. So when people, okay, great, thanks Akshay and Shreya. My judgment or my knowledge so far was correct. So thank you so much. So since they don't have sectional cutoffs, you can straight away maximize on a certain section and get more marks. Okay. To come back to the point that I was making, when I go to verbal ability, Snap has always focused on vocabulary. Till date, if I say out of the 40 questions, I would expect anywhere between 15 to 16 questions to have a vocab emphasis. Now, when I say vocab, what do I mean? What are the kind of question types that I have? The standard synonym, antonym, sometimes synonym, antonym pair, analogies, odd man out. Yes, all of them are included. Then Snap will also focus a lot on idioms and phrases. Then they have foreign words occasionally. Sometimes they have a couple of very interesting concepts. Like Snap is the only exam to my knowledge that has ever asked a question on kangaroo words. Now I can't explain, let's say, okay, I'll give you an example. A kangaroo word is a word hidden within another word, but both have the same meaning. So if I use a word arena, and arena means a stadium or an enclosure or an area which is used to conduct some event. Now, because one of the extended meanings of the word arena is area, I can say area is a kangaroo word within arena. So it comes from the concept of the pocket that kangaroos have on their body, the to hold their babies. It comes from that concept. But Snap, one of the years, just put in this question. कि which of these is a kangaroo word, and we were all stumped कि ये क्या है, ये लाइफ में पहली बार सुना. ऐसा तो हमको भी स्कूल में किसी ने नहीं पढ़ाया था. So they tend to throw up these kind of surprises, especially in English. And उसमें तुम कुछ नहीं कर सकते. So be prepared for that part. Then they have a lot of focus on spellings. Again, spellings is something जहाँ पे either you know it, you don't know it. Since the last 2 3 years, I have seen Snap focus a lot on punctuation. Where do you put the comma? Where do you put the quotation, etc. They ask you questions on figures of speech. Then Snap has a lot of focus on grammar basics. And here I do not mean stuff like mark the error or identify the correct sentence. वो सब तो होता ही है. What they really like to focus on is those kind of small things जो हम ऐसा छोड़ देते हैं, उसको we don't even consider. Stuff like direct and indirect speech, parts of speech, noun, verb, adverb. जैसे IFT threw that surprise this time कि what kind of phrase is it. Then there are clauses, tenses. There's something called a compound statement versus a complex statement. तो ये जो rules of grammar होते हैं, which we all studied in school, we all studied from Ren and Martin, and then we threw away कि एक छोड़ यार, लाइफ में कौन ऐसा clause भी पढ़ता है. Today that will come and trouble you when you take Snap. So if somebody really wants to practice something in Snap right now or prepare, it might not be a bad strategy to go back to your notes from whichever institute you are studying. Go back to your notes or your material and revise grammar. The best way again to do that would be to go back to the past Snap walks up to 2012, mocks as in the actual exam up to 2012, and practice those questions. तो आइडिया आएगा कि अच्छा किस तरीके का उनका क्वेश्चन टाइप्स होता है. Then you can go and look up all these things in your grammar books. Okay, so there is a lot of focus on vocab, grammar, fill in the blanks. Again, like NMAT, sometimes they have yeah, Sarang gave another example of kangaroo words, masculine and male. So male can be created out of the word masculine and they mean the same. That kind of a thing. So fill in the blanks, I've seen them having the NMAT style, not the NMAT style, but preposition based fill in the blanks, just as they come in NMAT. I have seen them having pronoun based fill in the blanks, article based fill in the blanks. तो ये सारा parts of speech में आ गया. Then you have those typical standard vocabulary based questions, word replacement questions. So Snap Verbal essentially becomes a game of vocabulary. Then you will also have jumbled sentences. However, I have also seen jumbled sentences in Snap जहाँ पे they have asked the first and last fixed and the middle four need to be arranged. First fixed, last four arranged. Last fixed, first four arranged. So they tend to keep introducing new varieties every time. RCs typically tend to be on the easier side. I have seen a mix of factual as well as inferential questions, but broadly, if I were to classify the whole Snap paper, including all its sections, I would say it is a very unpredictable exam in terms of its question types. ऐसी बहुत सारी छोटे 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 nuances है which keep coming each year and which I cannot tell you that you do this list then ये तुम्हारा काम हो गया. Maybe I can tell you 4 months before Snap. बट इवन आफ्टर दैट देर इज नो गारंटी कि सारा आएगा इसके बाहर से कुछ नहीं आएगा. सो स्नैप इज द काइंड ऑफ पेपर विच यू कांट रियली होल्ड विद इन अ सिलेबस और अ बाउंड्री. इफ योर बेसिक्स आर गुड it is very easy to crack Snap. Okay, now I'll move on to your questions. Before that, what I'll do is that because we do not have sectional cutoffs, I'll tell you what would be my strategy to crack Snap each year and what I'm planning to do on Sunday. So, typically, what I used to do was because LR was the maximum scoring section, I used to try and do the whole of LR. Then, generally, for me personally, verbal is a stress relieving section because I'm damn good at English and my vocabulary is good. So, I used to do verbal and 10-15 मिनट में हो जाता था. तो मुझे एक साइकोलॉजिकल बूस्ट मिलता था. आई यूज्ड टू स्पेंड approximately 50 minutes 50 on LR, then do verbal in another 15 minutes or so. उसके बाद go to GK. GK in any exam I never devote more than 10 minutes for GK because you either know GK or you don't know GK. So I used to have a 50 15 and 10 का ratio, at the most 50 20 10 का ratio. Okay, and 80 minutes में I used to finish all these three. Last का 35 to 45 minutes based on the difficulty of the other sections I used to keep for quant. This time round with more questions for LR and less for GK, I am going to probably assume that GK जैसा कुछ है ही नहीं. मैं पूरे पेपर की लास्ट की 10 मिनट I am going to keep for GK. Maybe what I'll do is that I'll divide my overall paper into 105 minutes initially. That's 35 minutes per section. Personally, for me, out of these 105 minutes, I would keep 80 minutes for quant plus LR. 80 questions, 80 minutes. Of course, I won't be able to solve everything within that. And I'm not even going to try that. But generally, I'm going to keep approximately 40 minutes for both of them, plus or minus 2-3 minutes here and there. Then I will keep 25 minutes for verbal. Last के 15 मिनट में I will try and do GK initial one round of GK. फिर अगर टाइम बचता है तो I'll go back to those questions जहां पे I was slightly confused in the other 3 sections. But that is how I plan to take the test in the exam hall. Okay, now each person can have a different strategy, each person can have a different plan. Broadly, I would say that the most ideal case for any student to start off is to keep 30 minutes each for the main 3 sections. So that boils down to 1.5 hours. Then based on your strength, your weaknesses and the difficulty level in the exam, you need to spend 20 minutes allocating to a certain section जहाँ पे आपको लगे कि नहीं मुझे marks मेरे really बढ़ा देने हैं, and 10 minutes you can keep for GK. Again, mainly because there is no sectional cutoff. One myth, or I would not call it a myth, one unspoken rule about Snap has always been that you should try and get a non-zero score, which means a positive score in each section. लोग हमेशा मुझे पूछते हैं कि ओके इफ आई वांट टू मैक्सिमाइज व्हाट इफ आई डोंट अटेम्प्ट जीके एट ऑल. व्हाट आई टेल देम इज दैट देखो तुम कितना भी बुरे हो, तुमको जीके में दो चार क्वेश्चन तो पता ही होगे. अगर उतना भी नहीं पता ना तो तुम घर पे जाओ भैया, तुम स्नैप दो ही मत या एग्जाम मत दो. इफ यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट एनी सेक्शन वेर यू से दैट नो आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू टच इट एट ऑल, देन यू बैड, देन यू डोंट नीड टू टेक दैट एग्जाम. But in general, I would say try and ensure that you have a non-zero score in each section. Of course, try and maximize those two sections or three sections where you think you're damn good. But जो आपका वीक सेक्शन है उसमें भी एटलीस्ट कुछ तो करके आओ कि आपको नॉन जीरो मिले. दैट इज सॉर्ट ऑफ एन अनस्पोकन रूल. देर इज नो वैलिडेशन फॉर दिस, नो बडी सेज कि नहीं ऐसा होता ही है. इट्स जस्ट अ सेफ्टी मेजर दैट आई एम probably advising you about. Okay, so this would be the broad timing strategy that I would take for Snap. As they have said that you need to be there 2 hours in advance. So be there at around 12 or 12:30. Try to be there at 12:30. They have given an elaborate procedure. Ensure your photo is there. All those things that you do for CAT or NMAT, you need to ensure for Snap again. But just be prepared that the NMAT and CAT guys have been conducting an online exam for a few years now. So they are pretty aware of the process. They are sure of themselves. The Snap guys are going to be doing this for the first time. So for them also it will be a big learning experience. So they might tend to be slightly more stricter. कि नहीं नहीं हमने ऐसा बोला तो ये ऐसा करना ही था. Why did you not do this? That is where I would say try to be on time, try to ensure that all your documents, all your relevant material is in place, and then go and take Snap. Okay. Uh, Having said that, you guys can now start putting in your questions. So okay, one question that I'd seen earlier was from Sandipto. Is NMAT LR enough? Or his precise question was NMAT LR is not enough. San, it is enough. More or less, the things that you see in NMAT will be there in Snap. So in terms of pure learning, I would say anybody who has taken at least 2 out of NMAT, CAT, and IFT doesn't need to learn something new for Snap. Yes, but you need to practice more questions. So if you practice more questions, if you practice more mocks, sectionals, the actual exam, then it will help you a lot because you'll be accustomed or acclimatized to a lot more question types that you would not have seen in NMAT or IFT. That is something you need to remember. But in terms of pure theory, you don't really need to prepare something new for Snap. Okay. Sarang, what can be the difference between the mocks provided by TestFunda and the real Snap score? Just to get an idea. So, Sarang, at least in terms of Snap, I would say that the two scores should not differ by more than say 5 to 6 marks here and there. The other reason for this is that if you see this year Snap has released their own mocks. Last year and in fact a few years before that again they used to release something called snapshots, which were their mocks, and they used to tie up with us to provide this mock. So this year I think they released their own mock. So a lot of students came and took those snapshots and said, okay, this looks similar to the actual exam. So based on that experience, really, more than anything else, based on the experience that the Snap guys have had with us, the authorities there, I would say that the score should not differ by much. At the most, I would say keep a margin of plus or minus pi. Okay. So, Akshay, again, your same question or similarity between the actual Snap and test funda mocks. So, I would tend to say with confidence that they are quite similar in terms of even difficulty level and question types. Ankish, number of questions in each section and score to secure a call in SIBL. So, see, if I look at the increase in difficulty level, and last year people said that Snap was tough. So earlier the SIBM call used to come somewhere around that 105 to 110 mark. Last year it went pretty down, in my opinion. I would say if I look at it in terms of pure attempts, I would say somewhere around a 90 should be decent enough, especially because it's online. I would expect it to go down even further, maybe somewhere in the low to mid 80s. बट एस आई बी एम के लिए उतना 85 के आसपास 90 तक भी जा सकता है. इट डिपेंड्स ऑन व्हाट दे डू ऑनलाइन, बिकॉज इट इज ऑल्सो वेरी पॉसिबल दैट बिकॉज दिस इज गोइंग ऑनलाइन फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम in Snap's history, the questions might be easier. There's no guarantee, but they might be easier. So that is something you need to prepare for. In general, I would say to a lot of you guys who will now ask me questions, how many attempts, what kind of score, etc. Frankly, for Snap, I would say don't really go for a fixed score in mind. In Snap, again to give you a cricketing analogy, really, look at it like a flat pitch. कि अरे इस पिच में कुछ नहीं है. Of course there will be some initial hesitation and all of that, but try and think कि यहाँ पे 300 के ऊपर जितना बना वो बोनस है. That is the kind of mentality you will need to have. But broadly, if I think and if I start calculating, then what is the number of questions that you will have? Okay, so if you consider 40 English, 40 quant, and 40 in verbal, and if I assume even a 75 to 80% attempt, which a good student should be able to have, and if let's say if somebody wants to maximize his score, तो quant LR में ही 80 में से easily 70 और questions कर सकता है. वर्बल में आप अगर अज्यूम करो कि आपका vocab अच्छा नहीं भी है, तो another 20 odd questions can be done there, and say even 5 to 7 questions in GK. तो अगर मैं, if there's a good student, I can confidently say that that person can attempt anywhere between 90 to 100 questions. Now, even assuming 90 questions and an accuracy of 90%, तो 75 से 80 का स्कोर लाना मुश्किल नहीं है. So that way, if I look at the cutoff, I would say that the cutoff might go down compared to what I said earlier, and even touch somewhere between the 75-80 mark. So any score above 80 might also be a good score for an average student or an above average student. You're good at GK, then that will be the big differentiator. My call is that GK is going to be the game changer as far as Snap is concerned. Okay, Shreya, this is the first exam of mine. How much should I prepare in the... So sorry, I just skipped your question. Yeah. So this is the first exam of mine. How much should I prepare in the last 3 days to maximize my score? I am weak in quant. So Shreya, as I said, if you're weak in quant, really, you can try and catch up in the other sections. For example, as I've been saying all along, LR is a collection of puzzles. So LR is what you should target. Verbal, lot of vocab and grammars, if that is good from your part, that is something you can target. Secondly, when it comes to the quant DI section, the DI is not tough. So you can maybe try and look at DI. Quant maybe, if I go back to the arithmetic questions, stuff like averages, ratio proportion, profit loss, mixture allegation, percentages, all of that. The questions aren't very tough. Some might be. ऐसा नहीं है कि सब कुछ एकदम easy होता है. There might be a few tough questions, but generally it is on the easier side. What I would suggest is pick up one actual paper, solve it, get an idea, and then maybe pick up one sectional or two sectionals and one mock. But today is Wednesday, so from today to Friday, you can try and take maybe one or two actual paper ka quant sections and one or two mock ka quant sections, one sectional. छोटा छोटा, you need to devote 35 minutes to each. वो लेके बैठ जाओ, try and practice that. That will give you a much better idea. And इवन इफ यू डोंट वांट टू गिव टाइम, ये पांच जो पांच या छह पेपर मैंने बोले, maybe the first three or four you can do in a total timeless manner, कि ठीक है 35 मिनट्स पे फोकस नहीं करना है, जस्ट फोकस्ड ऑन सॉल्विंग देम. देन टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द preparation, maybe on Friday you can try one sectional or one mock with a 35-minute timing. That is how you can work out your plan. So now couple of similar questions. Okay, I'll just come to Sarthak's question first. How useful is the snap material released by them? See, Sarthak, I will not, and I cannot comment on the snap material released by the SIBM authorities or the snap authorities. This is because we've historically had some sense of a relationship with them where they've used our material as snapshots and they've had tie-ups with us, so and legitimate tie-ups with us. So I really cannot comment on the quality, but in terms of practice it is something you should go through just to get a feel of what kind of test and interface and everything they are providing. Otherwise, as far as snap is concerned, any material, any mock should be reasonably good. Okay, so Vivek, Samriddhi, and Sarang have similar questions, saying that cutoff might be as low as 70 for a 90 percentile. Even Sayam Dipto has the same question. So, yeah, so I'll answer all four questions at one go. And Sayam Dipto pointed out the exact point that I said, that 110 used to be when there was 180 ka score. Now, my total score is 150. A few minutes back, I actually calculated and gave you a best case strategy. That look, if somebody is good enough in quant DILR, so out of the 80 questions, even assuming he does 90% of those questions, attempts, तो उसका 72 attempts होता है. 90 is very good, huh? By the way. Even if I take 85, it's 68 attempts there. Now, out in the 40 verbal questions, somebody is reasonably good, and I'm now talking about a top level student, the 98, 99 percentile. Out of the 40 questions, if he does 60, so another 24 attempts, so 68 plus 24 is 92 attempts. And out of the 30 GK questions that he does 25 attempts, 25% attempts, sorry, 25% attempts, so 8 attempts, 7 से 8 attempt होता है. So the person tends to reach 100 attempts. This will be for a very good student. A slightly lower caliber student will reach around 90 attempts. So if I take 90 to 100 as my benchmark and I say that my best case accuracy is 90%, so my number of correct attempts comes to 81 to 90. Now बाकी का अगर गलत है तो I'm anyways going to lose. If I'm not wrong, Snap will have I think 1/4 negative marking. They'll probably lose somewhere around 2.5 marks. So that way, if my score is 81 and I'm losing 2.5, my score comes down to around 77. अगर मेरा score 98 comes down to around 87. So then if you look at it, this would be a very good score. So that way, if I see, the cutoffs can go down below 75, because my good students will probably be scoring in that 75 to 85 wala range. Here, as I again said earlier, the game changer will be GK. Somebody is good at GK, manages to crack 15 questions, तो अपने स्कोर को 90 तक भी खींच सकता है. But I cannot assume that. Most students will probably have 7 to 8 attempts, max to max 10 attempts in GK. So that way, if I look at it, 70 does not seem to me as too low a score. I would say somewhere around that 70 would be okay for 98. A 74, 75, 76 would be okay for a 99. When I started this session or a few minutes back, I started my cutoff prediction by saying 85. But when I personally also sat and calculated, I realized that 85 मतलब ये ना मैं अपने स्टैंडर्ड से बोल रहा हूँ कि ओके गौरव दवे वुड डू सो मेनी क्वेश्चंस, तो यार ये लेके आ सकते हैं. एंड आई सेड नॉट, and I'm not saying that I am damn good, but generally a faculty attempting the test, yes, any faculty, and there'll be faculty who will probably outscore me like anything, but faculty taking a test and a student taking a test will make a huge difference. So that way I immediately changed my prediction and said that look, 75 seems to be a much more reasonable and realistic cutoff. So that way 70 does not seem to be too far off. So Sarang, I hope I have answered your question here. Sarang, Sayangdipto, Samriddhi, so Sarthak, again, I believe I've answered your question on this part. Akshay's question is, since you mentioned DI have reduced, how many would be there? Akshay, no guarantees. I have seen papers with one DI set of three questions. I have seen papers जहाँ पे एक टेबल बेस्ड सेट कौन DI में आ गया, एक LR में आ गया. I have seen जहाँ पे कुछ भी नहीं था. I've seen charts coming in. So they, as I said, they have been known to throw surprises. But मैंने जनरली इसके स्नैप के DI को कभी भी अनसॉल्वेबल होते नहीं देखा. So I've seen it to be manageable, really speaking. तो यू मतलब आई वुडंट रियली वरी अबाउट DI. इनफैक्ट आई वुड बी हैप्पी इफ देयर इज अ 5 क्वेश्चन का सेट. मुझे कॉन्ट के 5 अलग अलग क्वेश्चन तो सॉल्व नहीं करने पड़ेंगे. कैलकुलेशन तो कैलकुलेशन, इसको ऐसे ही सॉल्व कर दूंगा. Okay. Samriddhi, where is the stuff released by SIBM? I think they have this mock test ka section on their official website itself. I don't recollect the exact link right now. What I can do is I'll ask, you can just write into support and my support team will send you the link in your inbox. Okay. Any particular, Ayan's question is any particular sections for GK to focus on? So, Ayan, as I said right at the beginning of this section, as Snap has announced that it's a current affairs section over the last 2 years, you can't really prepare for it or focus on it right now. What you can do is a lot of sources on the net. For example, our own PDFs for each week or bank preparatory material which give you headlines for each day will give you a recap of major events happening over the last 2 years. Now, if I look at Snap 2016 Jan to 2017, in today's world, this is a huge period. I frankly, if somebody tells me, can you tell me something important that happened in Jan 2016? I would say, बॉस मैं खुद क्या कर रहा था ना तभी वो भी मुझे याद नहीं है. तो मैं दुनिया क्या कर रही थी कैसे बताऊं. And this happens to all of us. So what I'm trying to say is that you can realistically prepare for all of it. Maybe what you can try and do is brush up on all the major happenings that have occurred over this 2 year period. Okay, that will be helpful. That might just give you those additional one or two questions that you can attempt. But nothing that you do right now will prepare you for Snap GK upfront. You need to be a good reader and a voracious follower of news over the last few months or so to be really well prepared. Okay. Uh, Sayan Dipto, again, you have the same question. So I believe I've answered your question when I answered the question by Ankish as well. If you feel there is something you want to ask me again in terms of GK, just type in and I'll answer it. Okay, Ankish's question, will NMAT go down this year? Ankish, I believe it should because I have spoken to a few students. I spoke to a faculty who's a senior of mine at Bajaj, and I mean, he is into this field, but he was my senior at Bajaj. And then I also saw my own score. I believe the scaling has affected people adversely. So that way, I feel that the cutoff will go down. I personally expect it to be around that 2.5 or 2.7 wala mark. But you can't really say कि last slot में क्या scaling होता है, कैसे होता है, etc. So just to tell you, and I'll give you my personal score so you'll get an indication. When I took the test and when I came out, I was probably expecting a score somewhere around the 245 to 250 mark. Okay, because I knew what I've done correctly and what I've not. My scaled score is 222. Okay, Since the last 4 years, my scores have been such that I clear the cutoff straight away. But among these last 4 years, this is my single 240 minus wala score or 235 minus wala score. My NMAT scores are always 235 plus. So that way, this has been my worst score in terms of scaling. उसके बाद when I saw a couple of other scores come out, in the open, I realized that नहीं यार मेरा score तो सच में अच्छा लग रहा है because people aren't getting that kind of scores. I've heard one or two reports of 230 or so, but generally 220s मुझे कम सुनाई दे रहा है. So that way, I believe there will be a lot of crowd of students in that 200 to 215 wala range. So the cutoff can come down. Secondly, uh, informally, remember that NMIMS calls lot of people for GDPI. There is a separate fee for GDPI. So yes, there is a realistic chance for the score to come down. Vivek, how are TF snap mocks compared to snap 16? So, Vivek, snap mocks at TF are typically very close to snap because historically, as I've been telling these guys, we have had tie-ups with SCMHRD and the snap authorities to provide the practice mock to students. This year, snap has gone ahead and made its own mocks, but because historically we have had a tie-up, we believe that our mocks are very close to what Snap releases. Of course, the final judgment or opinion is the students, but we believe that yes, they are realistically close, so you can try them and prepare for Snap. Okay, so guys, I believe I've answered most of the questions. Okay, Ayan's question: does NMAT take best of three or one bad reduces the? No, it's best of three. So you get a 0, 0, 220, you still get 220. Okay, so Ayan, don't need to worry about that. Your best score will count. Okay, so finally, I'll take questions if they come in. But just to summarize, the key thing to remember at this stage would be you don't need additional theory to prepare for Snap. At the most, if you want, you can go and revise grammar, rules of grammar especially. Spend half a day. If you want, go and sit with somebody who's good at grammar, maybe your teacher or somebody. Understand all those rules. That might just make a difference between 5 to 6 additional attempts in English or not. Vocabulary, you won't really be able to prepare right now. So the best way to prepare for SNAP, whether it's the vocab section, whether it's LR or quant, would be to take mocks, sectionals and practice tests right now. Theory, because if you have taken any one or two out of IFT, NMAT and CAT, तो आपका theory हो चुका है. You don't need to prepare something new. You need to go and take these mocks or the actual exam to understand the flavor of the questions. किस तरीके से पूछते हैं, एग्जामिनर का थॉट प्रोसेस क्या होता है, ऑप्शंस कितने क्लोज होते हैं, एलिमिनेट कैसे होते हैं, all these small small nuances you come to know when you take the mock or the actual exam. So for these 2.5 days from now till say Friday end or 3 days up to Saturday afternoon, you can actually take Snap ka practice mocks as much as you can and then go and take Snap on Sunday. Okay, I believe they've not changed the timing. It's still 2 to 4 as it always used to be. So one thing that I told people during CAT, please ensure that you have a light lunch. Anyway, Snap is a shortish exam, 2 to 4, तो आराम से आप 2 घंटे survive कर सकते हो. Ensure your toilet breaks accordingly. I mean, all these small nuances you have already seen. Okay. Vedaksha, your question is what to expect different in Snap this year? So Vedaksha, the very fact that they are going online is the biggest difference. Having said that, they always tend to introduce some new question type each year. Now it could be in GK, it could be in LR or verbal or anywhere. So I would be prepared for that. Verbal में typically they tend to introduce something new all the time in grammar or vocabulary. तो उसके लिए कोई prepare नहीं कर सकता. You have to accept it as and when it comes. If your reading is good, it will help. Samriddhi, I don't think they have sectionals. The Snap guys have full length mocks. Sectionals, I mean, at the cost of sounding like marketing, but yes, we do have sectionals and mocks. So if you want, you can talk to our support team. I believe the Snap guys have full length mocks. तो आप sectionals के लिए you can always come to us and have a look at the sectionals and mocks and practice them as and when you feel. Yeah. So guys, wish you all the very best. Please do well and stay in touch with me. After Snap, we'll probably do a couple of sessions on ZAT. One might be a general ZAT strategy. And we are trying to do something on decision making. So if something manages to get formalized, we'll definitely let you know. Yep. And again, wish you all the best. Anybody has questions, you have my contact details, which I've been sharing session on session. You can always get in touch with me and get your questions resolved. All the best. Thank you.